Hi, this is the second assignment for Religion 319. I'm going to talk about the astrology and defend it against Augustine's criticism in the City of God. And before moving on to his actual quote, I will make a simple summary of this presentation. I will talk about his quote and analyze it first, then moving on talking about the classical astrology and explain why I think his argument is not right. So this is a quote from Augustine, and it was taken from the City of God. And in this passage, Augustine he gives one of the most famous argument against astrology. So basically, he was saying that the astrology is false because the twins they are born almost at the same time but live very different lives, which he concludes if the star really decide people's destiny, then the twins they should have the same lives. But since they don't, so astrology must be fake. And this difference is lasting in many aspects like personalities, actions, professions, knowledge, accomplishment, and even of their deaths. So defending for astrology, and according to Augustine, sometimes the stranger they are even more similar to each other than the twins are. So he concludes that if the stars truly decide a human destiny, then the twins they should have almost identical lives because they were conceived at the same moment and born only a minute or seconds apart, but they don't, so astrology must be false. He believed the astrology assumed a direct connection between the position of the stars and a person's fate, but the real world doesn't actually show this pattern. And I think his argument is too absolute and too one-sided because predicting one's fixed destiny, but like in fact, classical astrology is more focused on the tendency of someone, not on a absolute thing or absolute fate. So, what is classical astrology? Classical, like when we say classical, we mean the kind of astrology that exists in the ancient Greek or Roman time, or also known as the Hellenistic astrology. It was not like the modern kind of, only talks about personality or zodiacal signs, but it was more a serious system of knowledge which combines astronomy, philosophy, and probably observation of nature and some religious things. So classical astrology, they had many different roads and it was influenced by Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and other Asian culture. And all these traditions, they were mixed together and created a very complex and organized systems. And people at the time, they believed that the heaven and human life, they were connected. So the movement in the sky could actually reflect what happened on Earth. And astrology at the time was seen as a system of divination and can be forecast the future. So one of the most popular branches, it was called genealogy. Yeah, so it studied the person's birth chart and shows the position of the stars at the exact moment of their birth. So from the chart, the astrologers can describe the person's potential things such as temperament or life rhythm or health and like stuff like that. And in the ancient world, the astrology was not a superstitious thing. It was a way to observe between the universe and human life. And another thing, another aspect about classical astrology is the religious views. So people feel like they being amazed when they look at the sky and they saw the sky movement match the life on Earth, like just like the seasons. And many saw the zodiacal signs or the stars, they were gods and they kind of worship them. And one most important thing is the sun. It was the most important that people honor it in at sunrise. This old sun worship influenced our calendar. So one example is the Christmas, especially in the Roman Empire. It started as a festival of the sun, but later it became a Christian holiday. Another thing is the from the scientific view. So the people once believed the Earth was at the center of the universe. So they saw the seven planets like the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus stuff. They move around the Earth in seven shells or spheres. And the sky, they were actually divided into 12 zodiac signs. And each sign they cover 30 degrees, starting from the spring starting point in the sky, which is called the vernal equinox. And there are actually 12 zodiac signs. And the impact of these zodiacal signs, they were considered as somehow, a destiny that was related to their characteristics. So each sign they was assigned to its own characteristics. So why the twins they live such different lives, even though they are born like only a few minutes apart. In astrology, even a tiny time differences, they can change the whole birth chart. For example, the ascendants or the rising sign, they move about 1 degree every 4 minutes. This means if a person is born just a few minutes earlier or later, the star in their chart might actually fall into a different houses, which can represent a different area of life, like career, relationship, or health, stuff like that. So even though the twins they share almost the same sky chart, their focus can be very different. And like one might care about family and emotions, and the other might care about their careers, things like that. So these differences they add up over time and gradually shape the different personality and the priorities. So in other words, astrology doesn't claim that the twins they must live a identical lives, but it was showing that they share a similar tendencies. But each person they might express these things in their own different ways. It's more like having the same starting map, but choosing the different paths to walk on. And another factor, I think, is that I think his argument is too one-sided or too absolute. Because in real life, our lives are shaped by many things, not just the stars, but also, the family background, environment, social relationships, education, and even mental state. So people they might share the same birth chart, but one grows up in a wealthy family while the other don't. And these factors they might, change their fate or their destiny. So, they could end up with different opportunities, choices, or mindset. And astrology never said that the star controls everything. It's more like a map of potential, showing that where the person has the advantages or the struggles, but the results, it depends on the person itself, himself or herself, like his will, effort, choices, and that's what truly makes his path different. So astrology gives a starting point, not the results. And another thing is that because Augustine, he's a Christian author, right? So in Christian views, especially in early Christian traditions, people believe only one God, and the God has the absolute power and wisdom. So, and only one God knows about the future. And under this belief system, astrology was often viewed as a form of idol worship because the people treating the stars as God, which could shape their human lives and went against Christians' monotheism. But not all Christians completely reject astrology, and some theologians admit that the stars might influence the person, but they firmly reject the idea that stars could control the soul or the salvation because they only believe one God could decide a person's fate. So this is why in the Middle Ages, many scholars try to reconcile the two, but only as a tool to understand the natural order, not as a replacement for the God's power in Christian views. Lastly, about the astrology history, and in the Asian world, astrology they were not seen as a superstitious thing, but more like a serious and a form of discipline, especially in civilization like Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. So they were viewed as a way to understand the order of the universe and the relation between human and natural things. So it was linked to medicine, weather, and religion and rituals. And especially in ancient Greece, astrology was connected to astronomy and philosophy. And in the Roman period, astrology became even more influential. Like some emperors, they often had court astrologers who can help them choose the right time for wars, ceremonies, or political actions. To conclude, I think astrology, it doesn't tell a person's fixed destiny, but it's more like giving a starting map, showing how the universe's energy look at the moment of their birth. And this birth chart can influence a person's personality, much more like a tendency, but not determine the fate. So, so that's why even the twins with the nearly the identical chart, they can end up with living very completely different lives. Yeah, thank you.